Thanks, Ed, very much for that very kind introduction. And I'd also like to give another round of applause to State Farm, who was so generous to sponsor this luncheon today. Let's thank them very much. Well, it's my pleasure to be here today and engage in discussions on the Common Core. As an organization supporting the growth and success of business here in McLean County, the future of our workforce is of the utmost importance to our members. On behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to thank Advance Illinois and all the partners in hosting this educational forum here in Uptown Normal this afternoon. It's now my pleasure to introduce Bob Corcoran, President of the GE Foundation. I promised him I'd make it brief, but there are a few things you'd like to know. Under the guidance of Bob Corcoran, the GE Foundation has taken a leadership role in the implementation of the Common Core state standards at the local, state, and national levels, sponsoring training programs for the 10,000 educators and advocating for the support from the public and private sectors. The Foundation has founded the Development and Training Institutes for educators on going deeper into the content and instructional strategies which align to the new standards, an extensive online warehouse offering free resources for teachers and communications for parents explaining the Common Core and their new assessments. Since 2005, the GE Foundation has committed nearly $250 million through its Developing Futures in Education program to improve student achievement in 7 targeted U.S. school territories: Louisville, Kentucky, Stamford, Connecticut, Cincinnati, Ohio, Erie, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, New York, New York, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, preparing each district for the successful implementation of the Common Core state standards. The learnings from this work has allowed the GE Foundation to expand their work by supporting states as they implement college and career-ready standards through best practice sharing, training programs, and management capacity. Bob Corcoran is an executive member of the Business Leaders Initiative on Human Rights and helped establish standards for human rights practices in business and industry. He helped create GE's principles on human rights to guide the company's operations and supply chain. Bob is a trustee of Sacred Heart University and is on the board of directors of the Business for Social Responsibility. Please join me in welcoming General Electric Vice President, Corporate Citizenship, and President of the GE Foundation, Mr. Bob Corcoran.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you. For those of you that have ever had the privilege or the challenge of being introduced like that, you feel like you should be lying in a casket with lilies on your chest. But thank you very much, Chris. I'm happy to be here and glad to be talking to a group of folks who really have an understanding and commitment to education. Now, we may differ at times on how best to do that, and that happens in every state and every community around the country. But the thing that we can't lose sight of is the importance of improving the educational system and educational outcomes for our children. It's quite simple. Now, a couple of things here in terms of going through a few pages. Why are we here? Why are these Common Core, these standards, why is this important and what drove some of this? This is a very simple chart. The U.S. is falling behind on education attainment in the world. The system that people like me with gray hair grew up in, many of you did and some of you were younger, was at the time inarguably the best in the world. We were the #1 country in terms of children who graduated high school. We were the #1 country in the world with per capita of college degreed people. This was the place to be. Today, we're 25th out of the top 34 OECD, that's the Organization of Economic Cooperation, top industrialized countries. 25th in math, 17th in science. In 2009, we ranked 21st when it came to high school graduation rates. 21st. We were first in the world when I graduated high school. This is a crisis. This is not okay. It's not okay for business. It should not be okay for public service or for citizens. When we do have children that graduate and go on to college, half of them need remedial courses to graduate. Now, what that means simply is that if you're a parent and you're saving and you're putting your child through college, or they've got Pell Grants or whatever they do to get their money, the first couple of courses, and in some cases the first year, is with non-credit bearing courses. So you're paying UI, or you're paying some other place, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for high school again. If we as a business made washing machines where 50% of them needed the motor replaced by the consumer, not by us, that warranty cost would put us out of business. We need to change. And so that's where we got to today. Quite simply, when you look at the best performing countries in the world and their education systems, you look at in math, places like Singapore and Germany and the Dutch and a few others. This chart, by the way, is small so that you purposely can't read it, so don't try. Let me explain what it is simply. If you look at the column on the rows, on the left, coming down, they're mathematical concepts. And across the top are grades 1 to 8. Okay? And the mathematical concepts go from the simple, things like the concept of whole numbers, and then the concept of fractions, addition, subtraction, on down to division, multiplication, and down towards the bottom you start to look at things that look a lot like geometry and a little bit of calculus, pre-calc stuff. So it's from the simplest concepts to more complex, and this is where they're taught in the top performing countries. What grades the subject's introduced in, where it's taught, and when they stop teaching it. So that nice little oval looks like a standard, like a distribution. You're looking at a scatter plot or something. You're trying to figure out where it is. You see that whole numbers and that sort of stuff is introduced in first and second grade. Then you stop teaching it later. And so by the time you get down into 7th and 8th grade, in Japan, for example, they're teaching calculus. That's all their kids focus on. They don't waste time on other stuff. This is a standard US state, 2008. That means when you hear educators, when you hear others say that we teach a mile wide and an inch deep, it's true. That's what we've done. Now, all sorts of good reasons for that, but when you look at what that produces, it's not a good thing. It's because the teachers say, or school districts say, well, we have to go back and make sure because we have students that change and they come from other areas and we have immigrants, we've got all sorts of stuff, we have to relearn these things. I'll give you my simple personal experience. I'm a GE executive. I get paid more money than I thought I would. I'm not giving it back, but I get paid well. My children have gone to public schools. I've lived in 8 different states in the GE Witness Relocation Program, and my kids have changed periodically between schools. They went to a nice school district in Connecticut. They're now in college and out. But when my daughter was in 3rd grade and my son was in 5th or 6th grade, we were sitting around the dinner table, and that's a time when your kids still talk to you. And so I said, so, Ian, how was school? Now, Ian, my son, is a boy. He loves math. He's a mechanical engineer today. He does not like anything else. So English and history and all that sort of stuff, nope, didn't like it. My daughter is at Emerson College in Boston, creative writing, liberal arts school, as creative and wee as you could find. So we're sitting at the dinner table. I asked Ian, so how was school today? Did you learn anything new? He said, yeah, the teacher introduced something yesterday and I don't understand it. So I said, well, what is it? Maybe I can help. To show if you're smarter than a 5th grader, clearly we're not, okay? So he tried to explain it and I said, well, I don't know. And my daughter, who had been sitting there just with her head on her hand and doodling at the dinner table, said, oh, that's easy. You take this number, you multiply it by this, and then you divide by that and you do this. My wife almost fell off the chair. I think I snapped my neck looking at her. I said, that's very good, Nina. The two talked for a second, and Ian said, great. So I said, Nina, how did you know that? Because I thought she'd been hiding her math savantness from me for, 8 years, 10 years. She said, oh, that's easy. We went through that last week. In what rational system, in a suburban, high-quality state, an affluent community, in what rational world should a child be taught the same things 3 years before that another child is being taught 3 years later? And the answer is no rational state. And that's the system we had. And that's what we got here. And so what it led to is these outcomes. That when you looked, this is again like 2008 data or so, that in 4th grade, our children in math would be about in the 2nd quartile. By 8th grade, they drop near the bottom quartile, and by 12th grade, they're coming out in amongst the bottom quartile of the top 35 countries in the world. In science, it's a Pyrrhic victory in the 4th grade. Most countries don't teach science in the 4th grade. So our kids could kick the snot out of somebody who hadn't yet been educated. Once they went through, it went back to a lesser quality outcome. Now that's some of the things that caused governors back in 2008, 2009 to sit down and look and see, we need to do a better job. Common Core state standards are a result of that. The National Governors Association, NGA, governors meet 3 times a year. And they get together and it's a sympathy fest, it's whatever. It's like it's lonely at the top. So they've got public sessions, they have private sessions, et cetera. Tough jobs. Governors actually have to govern. And they've got to run stuff. Back about 2008, 2009, a couple of governors were talking about the fact that a couple of multinational corporations were looking at their states to place new plants. And they were talking, comparing notes of, well, what did they ask you and what did they ask you? What they found was on the first visit, always, the corporations would ask, how's your education system? Show me your data on this community where you're trying to get me to go. The reason is really simple. For businesses, twofold. Number one, of course, we want a pool of employees that we can hire that can do the work and that we can train. But the other thing is we also need a place where our executives and our engineers, when they come in, their family and their children can be educated and we can transfer them. And if that doesn't happen, we don't go there. 3 of those states that shared the data lost the business and the companies went to another country. They began to compare notes, and they began to look at the differences in their standards and talk about that in the education subcommittee. They agreed to go and form and say, could we create a competitive standard together, a common standard? They funded a white paper. It came back. 48 governors out of 50 agreed to fund it again and go a little more to develop a full draft of it. It came back. 48 governors again said, okay, let's go take some of the common money, let's fund this and flesh it out. And that's how it came to be the Common Core. By the way, these are 21 states' math standards, and you can see they're all over the lot. Again, this is 2008. But today, the Common Core standards are not a common curriculum. It is not a federal-led mandate. It's not in Das Kapital from Karl Marx, and so that's not the root of it either. It's generated by the states. The governor of the state of Illinois at that time was a part of this decision. The commissioner of education for the state of Illinois was a part of this process with the chief state school officers at that time. And those groups were the ones who conceived, worked, and oversaw, and now each state by state has signed on. 45 states have done this. For my little hamster brain, I'm a business person, I am not an educator. My little hamster brain, the simplest way to look and understand what a standard is, my company makes something that I used this morning. It wasn't a refrigerator, it wasn't a light bulb, it was an aircraft engine. I flew here this morning on a jet engine, on a commuter plane, a regional jet with engines made by GE in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now we make jet engines. We make half the jet engines flying in this country today are made by GE employees in North Carolina or in Massachusetts or in Ohio. If you're flying somewhere, odds are you're going to be on one. We don't just say, well, let's decide locally. Let's let each engineer decide how they're going to make it. No, that's not okay. And I'm glad we don't let them do that. When we look at how to make something to a high-quality standard, we start off with something simple called a spec. It's like a blueprint. It's a specification. What is it this thing needs to do? That's a standard. The second thing we do is we figure out, okay, how are we going to make this? What materials do we need? Do we need Inconel or other alloys or titanium? That's curriculum. That's content stuff that you're going to make it with. Then we figure out how do we do it? What methods and processes and sequences do we use? That's teaching. That's the magic of what teachers do. How do I convey what's in my head and help this child transfer and learn that knowledge? And the last thing we always do, and you should be really thankful, is we test it. It's called quality assurance. We don't want planes falling out of the sky, and neither do you. And so when you look at standards, the Illinois state standards, they are quite simply, what does a child need to know and be able to demonstrate by grade and by subject at the end of the year. It's quite simple. It's not telling the teacher how to do it at all. Not telling what materials to use, not at all. The materials, so the curriculum, the teaching, those are local decisions. I assume in the state of Illinois there's no state curriculum. Those decisions are made by the school district, and in some cases by the principal in the school itself. That's really simple. Illinois has had a state standard since 1995, and it's been testing or assessing against that standard since then. So the issue of where it comes from, this is not a federal government thing. It's not coming out of Washington. We all know very little comes out of Washington. This didn't come from there. So this is crucial to us as a company, as a business. It's crucial to us to have a competitive workforce. It's crucial to us to have an economy where you can support and sustain $25 and $30 an hour jobs, because that's better than a $10 an hour economy. GE is a great company, technologically driven. We'll find engineers all over the place. We want the best we can get. We want a good system. But the most important thing to us is to have an economy with people who've got great jobs and great money so they can buy our refrigerators, our washers, take trips to go on vacations on a plane and use our engines. And that's the same kinds of things that State Farm wants. So there's a benefit, but there's also a belief that if we help with a high-quality educational system, that will have benefits for society and benefits for our companies long term. There are myths regarding Common Core about who wrote it and where's it come from and all sorts of stuff. The challenges with implementing it are really significant. They're hard. It's hard to do. Change. Mark Twain was a smoker, chain smoker. And a reporter who was following him once saw that he wasn't smoking and said, "So, Mr. Twain, I noticed you've stopped smoking. Was it hard?" He said, "No, it was easy. I've done it hundreds of times." Conceiving change is really easy. Implementing it is hard. And as a nation and as a state, we have to demonstrate that we are better than some of the things we read about ourselves in the last decade. It seems to me, in too many cases, we become a society that celebrates tearing things apart, that allows people to go and rip things apart without planning, without data, without fact, without thought for consequence. And we used to be a country that built things. We still are. And this is crucial to us, to build and rebuild an education system that will power an economy of the future. It'll power the jobs for my children and my grandchildren in the future. And that will keep us as the best country in the world, and Illinois as one of the best states in the union. We have employees that work here. We got business here. We got thousands of GE employees here. We want their kids well educated. And we want to put work here. Anyway, I'm going to stop speaking because I need to get off the stage. We'll be around for a panel, but thank you very, very much. But also thank you for the work that you do, and in particular to the public servants and the elected officials. Thank you. This is not an easy time to do what you do. Business people think about this periodically, and we go in a corner and suck our thumbs. We get judged in a marketplace where people buy stuff. You get judged every day on all sorts of stuff, and God love you for what you do. Thank you for stepping up and doing the work to help make Illinois a better place. And on this issue, thanks for your support.